September 23rd, 2025, a date that changed everything for the Philippines. On that morning, a 560-foot nuclear submarine slowly surfaced at Subic Bay. It carried 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, enough firepower to strike targets 1,000 miles away. And for the first time in decades, the U.S. Navy made sure the entire world was watching. But this was just the beginning. For 34 years, Filipinos had only seen cargo ships and tourist vessels in these waters. Now, a guided missile submarine sat where families once walked freely. Months later, 7 warships, 5 American, 2 Japanese, arrived together. It was the largest military gathering at Subic Bay since 1992. And then came the shocking announcement. The U.S. plans to build the world's largest weapons hub here, just 1,100 kilometers from China and Taiwan. The same week the USS Ohio arrived, China's aircraft carrier conducted sea trials nearby. No one believes that timing was a coincidence. In the next few minutes, you'll see every warship arrival and every reason why Filipinos were left completely stunned. So let me tell you what happened that morning. It was September 23rd, 2025, and the waters of Subic Bay were calm like any other day. But then something strange happened. A massive dark shape started rising from beneath the surface. And within minutes, a 560-foot nuclear submarine was sitting right there in plain sight. Now here's the crazy part. Submarines are supposed to stay hidden. That's their whole purpose. But the U.S. Navy didn't hide this one. They announced it to the world. They released photos, shared details, and made sure everyone knew exactly what had arrived. Why would they do that? Because this wasn't just a visit. This was a message. Think about it. The USS Ohio carries 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, enough to destroy targets 1,000 miles away. This thing was built during the Cold War to carry nuclear weapons. Later, it was rebuilt into a precision strike machine. And guess what happened the exact same week? China's newest aircraft carrier started training in the South China Sea. Coincidence? I don't think so. But wait. The submarine was just the beginning. A few days later, another announcement dropped, and this one changed everything. The United States said they weren't leaving. They were planning to stay for good. So the submarine arrived, but what came next was even bigger. Just days later, the U.S. Navy made an announcement that shocked the entire Philippines. They wanted to lease a 25,000 square meter warehouse at Subic Bay with a 5-year contract. This wasn't a short visit anymore. This was a permanent return. Now let me give you some context here. Back in 1992, the Philippines made a historic decision. They asked the Americans to leave. It was a proud moment for sovereignty and independence. For 34 years, Subic Bay became a peaceful commercial zone. No warships, no military bases. Filipinos built businesses, raised families, and moved on from the military past. But now, that entire chapter was being rewritten. And here's what made the announcement even more serious. The new facility would sit just 10 miles from an existing Marine Corps warehouse. That means American military infrastructure was already growing quietly in the background. The Navy said no weapons would be stored there, but experts didn't believe that was the full story. This was clearly the first step towards something much larger. Think about it like this. Imagine a neighbor who left your building 34 years ago and suddenly signs a 5-year lease to move back in. That's exactly how Filipinos felt when they heard the news. But this announcement was still not the biggest shock. Months earlier, something even more massive had already happened at Subic Bay. And what Filipinos saw during the Balakatan 2025 exercises left them completely speechless. Now let me take you back a few months to something even more intense. From April 21st to May 9th, 2025, the Balakatan exercises took place. Balakatan means shoulder to shoulder in Tagalog. And this year, it was the biggest ever. Subic Bay became the main staging point for the entire operation. Warships, destroyers, and amphibious assault vessels filled the waters. And what Filipinos saw next looked straight out of a war movie. Hovercraft roared across beaches at full speed. Helicopters dropped soldiers from the sky in perfect formation. Anti-ship missiles were set up along the coastline. The U.S. Marine Corps even debuted their brand new littoral force unit from the 3rd Marine Regiment. This wasn't practice. This was preparation for real conflict. And the location of these drills? Palawan, right next to the South China Sea. Imagine your quiet local beach suddenly turning into a military zone. That's exactly what happened to families living near Subic Bay. One day it's peaceful. The next day, warships are everywhere. But even this wasn't the most shocking moment. A few months later, in January 2026, something unprecedented happened. 7 warships from 2 different nations arrived at Subic Bay, all at the same time. Now here's where things got really serious. In January 2026, something happened that no one in the Philippines had ever seen before. 7 warships arrived at Subic Bay, all at the same time. 5 were American, and 2 came from Japan. This was the largest gathering of foreign military ships since the base closed in 1992, and the sight left Filipinos completely speechless. Guided missile destroyers lined up across the piers. Amphibious vessels and support ships filled every corner of the bay. Patrol boats moved through the waters non-stop. Hundreds of sailors poured into the streets of Olongapo City. A quiet free port had suddenly turned into an active international naval station. But here's what made this moment even more significant. Japan was now operating alongside American forces in Philippine waters. This was a big deal, because Japan had avoided foreign military missions since World War II. Their presence meant one thing: a united front against China's growing power. And this coalition was just getting started, because behind closed doors, officials were planning something even bigger. They wanted to turn Subic Bay into the world's largest weapons hub. So warships were arriving, facilities were being built, but the biggest plan was still hidden. And when it came out, it shocked everyone. The United States wants to turn Subic Bay into the world's largest weapons hub. Not just a base, a full manufacturing center for military equipment. Cerberus Capital Management, a major American investment firm, bought large parts of the port. Washington started working with Manila and Seoul to build weapons production facilities. The goal? Warship repairs, munitions manufacturing, and military logistics, all in one place. And here's the most important detail. Subic Bay sits just 1,100 kilometers from Shenzhen, China, and the same distance from Taipei, Taiwan. That's not a coincidence. That's strategic positioning. Now think about what this means for local Filipinos. For 34 years, they built malls, hotels, and businesses in this area. And now, their hometown might become an arsenal. The Philippine Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard have already started moving units into the bay. Officials announced 500 joint military activities planned for 2026 alone. This wasn't a slow transition. This was a complete reversal. But why is all of this happening so fast? The answer lies in what China has been doing in the South China Sea. So why is all of this happening right now? Why are warships arriving, weapons hubs being planned, and military bases coming back? The answer is simple: China. Over the past decade, Beijing has become more and more aggressive in the South China Sea. Chinese Coast Guard ships have attacked Philippine vessels with water cannons. Filipino fishermen can no longer access waters their families used for generations. Artificial islands have been built and turned into military bases, despite promises not to. And here's the thing. The Philippines took China to court and won. In 2016, an international tribunal ruled that China's claims had no legal basis. But Beijing simply ignored the ruling and kept expanding. So what choice did the Philippines have? They couldn't face China alone, and they knew it. The same week the USS Ohio arrived, China's newest carrier was training nearby. That timing told the whole story. The American return isn't about empire, it's about survival. But this decision has reopened old wounds inside the Philippines, because not everyone agrees that bringing back the military was the right choice. Now here's where the story gets complicated. Not everyone in the Philippines is happy about the American return. Let me take you back to 1992, a moment that defined the nation. The Philippine Senate voted to reject a new treaty with the United States. They said no more foreign military bases on their soil. It was a proud declaration of independence, proof that a former colony could stand alone. For 34 years, that decision shaped Filipino identity. But now, that chapter is being rewritten. And for older Filipinos who fought for the 1992 closure, watching warships return feels bittersweet. They were right about the dangers they warned about, but the sovereignty they won is slipping away. Younger Filipinos see it differently. They grew up watching China bully their fishermen. For them, the Americans aren't invaders. They're protectors. This is the tension the Philippines now faces. Pride versus survival. And here's the legal trick that makes it all possible. Under the EDCA agreement, American forces don't own the bases. They just operate from Philippine facilities. And for countries across the region, this brings both hope and fear. Hope, because smaller nations no longer have to face Beijing alone. Fear, because all this military buildup could trigger the very war it's trying to prevent. Here's how fast things have changed. Japan has increased defense spending and loosened its pacifist restrictions from World War II. Australia is getting nuclear-powered submarines through the AUKUS deal. The Philippines has signed new defense pacts with Tokyo and Canberra. A web of alliances is forming, and Subic Bay sits right at the center. Think of it like a neighborhood watch, everyone teaming up because one neighbor became dangerous. But here's the real question no one can answer yet. Will all of this prevent a war with China, or make one more likely? So here's the big question that no one can answer. Will all of this military buildup actually prevent a war, or start one? The submarines, the warships, the weapons hub, the joint exercises, they all serve one purpose: deterrence, making China believe that attacking would cost more than it's worth. The idea is simple: show enough strength, and your enemy won't let you move. But here's the problem. Some experts say this strategy could backfire. When one side builds up military power, the other side feels threatened. And when both sides feel threatened, small mistakes can turn into big wars. China has already responded with more military activity of its own. So the cycle keeps spinning, and no one knows where it ends. Now think about who pays the price if this gamble fails. Not the generals in Washington or Beijing. It's the fishermen of Subic Bay, the families living near the port, the sailors on those ships. If deterrence works, Filipinos live with a permanent military presence. If it fails, their home becomes a battlefield between superpowers. Either way, the Philippines will never be the same again. And the truth is, this story is just getting started. So let's step back and understand what's really happening here. The U.S. Navy's return to Subic Bay isn't just a military move. It's a complete reversal of 34 years of Philippine history. The same forces that were kicked out in 1992 are now being welcomed back. And the reason is simple: the world has changed. From the USS Ohio's dramatic arrival to the 7 warship convergence, every event tells the same story. Subic Bay is becoming the heart of Indo-Pacific security once again. But here's what most people miss. This isn't American expansion. It's Philippine survival. The nation that once said leave is now saying please stay. Not because they forgot about sovereignty, but because China made the alternative worse. Filipinos didn't change. The threat did. And that's the real lesson here. Strategic decisions don't last forever. What worked in 1992 doesn't work in 2025. Nations must adapt or face the consequences alone. Right now, somewhere near Subic Bay, a family is watching warships pass by. Their parents saw cargo ships. Their children see destroyers. And no one knows what the next generation will see. Remember that 560-foot submarine that surfaced for the whole world to watch? It carried 154 Tomahawk missiles and one simple message: America is back. The Philippines was left stunned. And now they're learning to live with a future they never expected. From the USS Ohio's shocking arrival to the world's largest weapons hub, Subic Bay will never be the same. A 34-year chapter of peace has officially ended. Now the Philippines stands at the center of a superpower showdown. If this video opened your eyes, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Share this with someone who needs to understand what's happening in the Indo-Pacific. And tell me in the comments, would you welcome the American return or worry about it? The future of Subic Bay affects us all.